My name is Scott Biddy. I am Vice Chancellor for University Relations on the UC Berkeley campus, and it is really my pleasure to welcome you today and to give you a brief campus update. But the most important thing to do when we have a group of people together in a room like this is to say thank you. And that is more than anything the purpose of our activities today, to give you an insider's look at some aspect of the campus, because you are, in fact, among our very closest friends. When you look at the role that philanthropy plays on the Berkeley campus, the people like you who year in and year out provide unrestricted support for this great institution we all love, it is just critical, and we really can't say thank you enough, because you are really a linchpin in all of the work that is going on the campus to maintain that jewel that we all treasure. It is an increasingly unusual institution, a place that it has such quality, but at the same time is really driven by a mission that is geared toward the public good. And thank you for helping us to continue to achieve the things that we all value. So what I'd like to do is just give you a brief kind of snapshot of a few things that are happening on the campus. You know, one of the things that we're all I forgot to say something. I think we have a number of emeriti faculty who are with us today, and I want to especially welcome you, because you have worked on both sides of that equation I just described. You provide support, and you've also devoted, in many cases, your entire careers to the Berkeley campus. So if you're an emeriti faculty, may I ask you to raise your hand? Oh, terrific. Thank you. So, of course, one of the things that we do at Berkeley that is very essential to our core mission is we educate students. And so I'm happy to report that demand for spots in the 2015-2016 class is greater than ever. We had 78,800 applications. Now, that is terrific, because what that demonstrates is that students more than ever really think that Berkeley is a terrific place to get an education. I don't want to bring up a difficult topic, but if you happen to have neighbors or grandchildren or other people who are applying, the competition is more fierce than ever. For those of you, though, who know people who did get into Berkeley, you should really congratulate them, because it is quite an accomplishment. The qualifications of that entering class are just stellar. And when I have the opportunity to interact with those students, I have to say I feel a little bit better about the future, because with those bright kids tackling the challenges that we all face, good things are going to happen. There were also 17,200 transfer student applications. And the transfer student population is one that I particularly admire, and that is relatively unique to Berkeley among the very top-tier institutions. And I remember a few years ago we were in the UK, and we actually met with a number of members of Parliament who were commenting that opportunity for people to come to a place like Berkeley in a non-traditional way was really something that they saw as being very admirable, and they were actually trying to emulate in the UK, because their system tends to be a little bit too rigid. Just a quick anecdote on that. When we got the $113 million Hewlett Challenge Grant, we went down to talk about the announcement, and they said, this is our communications person you'll be working with. And of course, he was a Berkeley alum, but more importantly, he was a transfer alum. And he talked a lot about the uniqueness of that experience, and it really, I think, drove a lot of the energy that we were able to announce that gift with. The campus, for all of the challenges that you read about in the newspaper, and there are challenges, many, the campus continues to be one of the world's great institutions, and we get this reaffirmed time and again in the variety of rankings that come out. Now, as we all should recognize, we tend to focus on the rankings that are the kindest to us, but the good news is most of them are kind to us, and the two in particular that I am always sort of struck by are the the Times Higher Education supplement that comes out of London. And in those rankings, Berkeley has consistently been in the top 6. And those top 6 institutions have been consistent pretty much throughout the history of that particular ranking. And in fact, they have taken those 6 institutions and branded them the super brands of higher education. And it's a very interesting group. It is Oxford and Cambridge, Harvard, MIT, Stanford, and Berkeley. And one of the things that we've taken from that is that it's helpful to be in a good neighborhood. And so we, for all of our rivalry with Stanford, one of the things that we recognize is that we are both better institutions by being in the same ecosystem. The other ranking that has come out recently is the U.S. News ranking. Now, we're well aware of the undergraduate rankings of the U.S. News and World Report, where we are always the top-ranked public institution, but we're usually around number 20. And if you look at the things that they particularly value in that ranking, public institutions will always struggle because we have a higher student-faculty ratio. We have a different financial model, and in many ways that undergraduate ranking measures wealth to one degree or another, and while we're rich in many ways, we are not as wealthy as many of our elite private peers. But when U.S. News did a ranking that also included the research enterprise of these institutions, we rose to number 3 in that ranking after Harvard and MIT. And I think that actually tells a more complete story about the way in which this campus operates and the values that it espouses. Of course, Berkeley continues to have impact in a broad range of areas. I'll give you a few examples. 2 of our most distinguished scientists recently received the prestigious Breakthrough Prize, which is awarded down in Silicon Valley and actually comes with $3 million. Structural biologist Jennifer Doudna and one of her colleagues were honored for the discovery of a revolutionary DNA editing technique that is really making amazing strides in how we will treat the genetic basis of disease. You may have also seen that Jennifer has been getting a lot of publicity, not just for the breakthrough, but also for the very substantial work that she's been doing to make sure that people are aware of the ethical dimensions of this technology that need to be really carefully monitored and guided. At the same time, Nobel laureate and cosmologist Saul Perlmutter accepted the award on behalf of the Supernova Cosmology Project, which co-discovered the accelerating expansion of the universe and dark energy. Manish Agrawal won the $1 million Allen Distinguished Investigator Award for his research in artificial intelligence. And I'm an English major, so this is my favorite award to mention today, and that is English professor and former U.S. Poet Laureate Robert Hass received the Wallace Stevens Prize from the American Academy of Poets. And I will tell you, I love Robert Hass and I love Wallace Stevens, so that is a great combination of talent. The other thing that I'd like to give you a little bit of a sense of is some of the forward-looking aspects of the campus. So since Chancellor Nick Dirks, who by the way sends his greetings to you today, since he took the helm just about 2 years ago, the campus has been working on a core set of priorities that are focused on really 4 areas: undergraduate education, research and the innovations in research that Berkeley is known for, global engagement, and the arts. So one of the things that I would really like to draw your attention to is this global engagement strategy, because in fact you are sitting in the location that is really at the heart of what this strategy really represents. So last fall, Chancellor Dirks unveiled ambitious plans for what was known as the Richmond Field Station, but now will be known as the Berkeley Global Campus at Richmond Bay. And this is a place where we are hoping to build significant partnerships with global universities to do collaborative research, to do collaborative education programs. When you look at the ways in which a university can globalize, many institutions have opened branch campuses around the globe. And some of those have had meaningful impact, but they've also had many challenges. Anytime you go to other countries, you have to navigate, in some cases, issues around freedom of speech and academic freedom. There are all kinds of challenges in the way that we reconcile our particular values to the places in which we're trying to do business. So while we will continue to engage globally, and we will have faculty and students who will be making those treks around the world to collaborate, we thought it was really important that we build a place here where our global partners can come and collaborate with us in our own neighborhood. And so that is the general idea of the Berkeley Global Campus. It will have education programs, research programs, and I think it's going to be a really revolutionary approach to global collaborations. We already have a number of institutions that have expressed specific interest, and I think we'll be announcing, hopefully within the next couple of months, some actual partnerships. The two institutions that are farthest along in their conversations with us are the National University of Singapore and Cambridge University. Part of what drives these particular partnerships is that these are institutions where we already have strong faculty collaborations. Any of you who know the Berkeley campus well will of course recognize that none of us who are in the senior administration go around telling our faculty what they should do. Our faculty make their own decisions, develop their own priorities, and set their own research agendas. So in building the Berkeley Global Campus, we've been guided by the collaborations that our faculty already have, and there are a handful of institutions, which are all really high-quality institutions where our faculty are very engaged and already have partners that will lead to collaborations here on this site. We also hope to bring in private industry into this site so that there will be ways in which the work that Berkeley is doing and the breakthroughs that we're achieving can begin to find their ways into the marketplace and into private industry in ways that will allow the technology to actually have commercial impact and be able to actually be developed in ways that can improve the lives of the people here in the Bay Area and around the world. So it's a very exciting time. You know, you'll have a sense of it. This is one piece of it. We own this property. We own the property across the road. Altogether, it's about 134 acres. We can ultimately build about 5.5 million square feet of space. And just to give you a point of reference, the main campus has about 13.5 million square feet of space. So I don't think it's going to happen overnight. Susan Chamberlain, who's here and lives in the neighborhood and knows a lot about real estate, gives us very good advice about developing something like this, and it will take some time. But if we could all come back and sit here in this same space 50 years from now, I feel quite confident there will be something remarkable going on right here. And for universities, 50 years is not that long. The Campanile turns 100 this year, and so Sather Tower is really a beautiful symbol of Berkeley. And if you come to Cal Day, which I think is a week from tomorrow, is that right? Yes, April 18th, yes. We'll be doing some special celebrations around the Campanile, including having a group of acrobats who will be doing a performance piece around the Campanile. It promises to be very exciting. And of course, if you come to Cal Day, you can also hear faculty lectures and concerts and participate in all kinds of activities. But if you'd like to stay informed, please feel free to visit campanile.berkeley.edu, and you'll see a lot that is going on to celebrate this 100th anniversary. So before closing, I just want to mention another ranking, and that is, it came out just this week, and it's about college museums. Berkeley was just ranked among the top 10 college museums for its natural history collections that include the Hearst Museum, which you are visiting today. Our campus was the only school in the West to break into that top-tier group, which took into account the quality of exhibits, public access, and educational programs that reach out to the community. And so I'd like to congratulate my colleagues at the Hearst who were very much a part of allowing us to achieve that ranking. And as you will see, you are in a place that just, I'm a little turned around, but I think it's back there. There are treasures beyond imagination. And When I actually arrived at Berkeley and got my first tour of the Hearst Museum, I was just stunned. And it is one of those treasures of Berkeley, and there are so many that none of them seem to get quite the attention they deserve. But at the time, that Hearst collection was actually stored in the Hearst gym. And if I'm not mistaken, some of it seemed, as I recall, was stored under a seismically unsound swimming pool. And so over the course of a few years, we created this storage facility so that these treasures can actually be protected as they deserve. And it's a great accomplishment, and our colleagues at the Hearst Museum deserve a great deal of credit for having managed to really protect the treasures that you're about to see. This is a nice segue for me to introduce Suzanne Pierce. She is the interim deputy director of the Hearst Museum, and she's going to introduce the panel that will be talking to you today. And so, Suzanne, I would like to turn this over to you. Thank you.
Well, welcome everyone. As Scott said, I'm the interim deputy director for the Hearst Museum. I'm serving in this role while the current director, Mary Lynn Salvador, is transitioning to retirement, and as we are searching for a new director for the museum. I should say that in my other life, or my regular job, is in the Vice Chancellor for Research Office, where I serve as a senior strategic advisor. Actually, both jobs are quite a kick, but the museum kind of takes the cake there. It's a little more fun than what I do on a regular basis. I will keep my comments brief. I just want to let you know that you're in really for a very special treat this afternoon. You do get to see a behind-the-scenes look at some of the collections. They're not all here. We're working on getting them here. And I took a little preview myself, because when I was preparing these notes, I asked for a couple examples of what you might be seeing. And some of the examples, you'll see one of the larger pieces that we have, and probably the heaviest, and we call him the Doctor, and it's a 26th dynasty Egyptian sarcophagus purchased for the museum by William Randolph Hearst in 1903. But mysteriously, this sarcophagus was never used, and that remains a mystery, and it's only half of it, so don't really know what was going on there, but we've got it. Plus a collection of miniature pomo baskets, and I did go back there and take a look because I was practicing my comments. I kept referring to them as tiny as 1/16 inch in diameter, but I didn't really visualize that. So when you go back and see it, I mean, that is really tiny. I mean, this is an amazing, tiny, tiny basket, plus other baskets, and just, as Scott said, you just kind of walk through with in awe of this collection. It's amazing. I would just like to give you an idea of some of the activities that are happening at the museum. Even though the gallery is closed, there's still actually quite a bit going on. The staff are quite busy. We have construction projects. We have 2 going on in Crowborough, upstairs and downstairs, renovating the main gallery and modernizing that space. We continue to inventory and digitize the objects in the collections, particularly as we're moving them. It gives us the opportunity to do that. And each item is carefully packed, and it gets a barcode so we can actually find exactly where an object is as it's moving to another facility. And we're upgrading computer systems and the databases so that we can, again, keep track of this amazing collection. And all of these projects will improve our ability to better serve our research, teaching, and public outreach activities that are so important. And we'll keep you informed of our progress as we meet our goals. And that's about it, except that I just have to say it's really a pleasure working with the staff in the museum, and they are doing a terrific job. And we have 3 of them today who are serving on the panel, and I won't go into their bios. You can read briefly about them, but just so you know who's who. We have Victoria Bradshaw, who is head of collections, Ira Jacknis, who's the research anthropologist, and Jane Williams, the conservator. So, thank you again. Thank you for your support. Thank you for coming out, and you are in for a very special treat. So I hope you enjoy your afternoon.
a little on the rickety side here. So I am Victoria Bradshaw. I'm head of the collections here at the Hearst Museum, which means that I oversee collections management, conservation, and registration activities in the museum. And we're really glad that you were able to get out here and to our facility here in Richmond today. And when Scott was talking about the Berkeley Global Campus, we actually kind of see ourselves as the poster child for the campus because our collections represent virtually every area on the planet and with representation from many, many cultures from all over the planet. So I think we're very well positioned being out here for when that whole thing gets going. My part of the talk is going to focus mostly on the moves that we've been doing for the moves, I should say, that we've been doing for the last 5 years. I tend to look at the really practical kind of nuts and bolts and how do we get things done stuff. So I have a few statistics here that I'll give you. I'll try not to get too detailed about that stuff. But a little bit of background on this building. The university bought this building in 2008, and it's a huge building. I don't actually know the full square footage of it, but they carved out about 100,000 square feet that they dedicated to collection storage for various departments on campus. We are one of the departments. The Berkeley Art Museum and BAM PFA is another department. Paleontology, the Bancroft Museum, College of Environmental Design, and Earth Sciences has one small space that has jars full of dirt from long ago that actually is a very wonderful research resource. And we are by far, of these groups that I just mentioned, we're by far the largest landholder in this part of the building with about 36,000 square feet of storage, climate-controlled, very good quality storage. Behind us, there's one more space that's being renovated we'll be sharing with the Art Museum. We'll be able to move into this space in May. So we're continuing to grab as much space as we can while we're out here. The first part of our collections got moved in here in about 2010 when the university sold another building that they had owned in Emeryville. And at that point, we moved just a lot of our oversized collections down here. You'll see some of these pieces when you come that had been stored in pretty substandard, not very great storage down there. When we did that move, it really got us thinking about kind of the bigger picture of our collections, which at the time were stored in 5 buildings in 3 different cities, which is obviously not optimal for collection storage since it means a lot of staffing issues, just trying to get people to run around and check up on everything. So that got us thinking that we really needed to start focusing on trying to consolidate our collections and get them down into as few buildings as possible. So toward that end, Scott had referenced the space on campus, Hearst Gymnasium for Women. And we did have the basement there. We actually still do have collections in there because we've been able to enjoy some of the more interesting aspects of trying to get construction done. And so we're not quite ready to move out of Hearst Gym, but we've been packing and prepping for that for the last 2.5 years. And we should be able to move out of that particular space in July, so we're looking forward to that. And that space is where our mostly archaeology collections and our human remains collections are stored. And we decided that we needed to keep those on campus because they're pretty heavily researched. So those are the collections that will be getting moved over to Kroeber. To make space for those collections, we had to vacate a portion of our Kroeber space over there, so we moved our Africa, Asia, and Oceania collections came here, and that was over the last couple of years. And you'll be seeing a lot of those when you go into our storage space. So the last part, the Marchant building, which I referenced, it's in Emeryville. Since 2009, we've been renting space back. At the time the university sold the building, we had just completed a pretty extensive move into that space, and we just didn't have the funding or the psychological wherewithal to pack up and move it again quite so soon. So we've been renting that space. The space is ready in May, and so we'll be able to move out of there in the next few months. So we anticipate that all this moving around should be finished about a year from now. So if you come back in a year, and hopefully you will, we will, hopefully all of our collections will either be in this building or the collections that we kept on campus. The core collections remained on campus because of their teaching and research use. These collections include Egypt, pre-Columbian Peru, our classical Greek and Roman collections, and California Indian. And these collections are all very, very heavily used for teaching and research, and I have some stats for that. In an average year, we've been in a moratorium since we began all these moves, so we haven't been doing very much actively allowing teaching use of the collections or for research. But in a normal year and beginning in the fall of 2015, when we do get mostly back to normal, we normally provide about 3,000 hours every year for direct teaching support of our collections, where we work with campus faculty to pull objects from storage, and the students can come in and actually have this real kind of face-to-face with the objects, which is a pretty unique experience. You know, they're seeing things that most people will only see in a museum behind glass. So that's one of our very, very important functions. The other function that we do is about another 3,500 hours a year of having researchers come into the collections. Although this is kind of a secret hidden gem here kind of on campus and just sort of in the Bay Area, this collection is very, very well known to researchers throughout the world and academics. It's a very well known collection. So we've had people come from virtually every country in the world to come and study our collections and do research and produce PhDs and publications and books and all those kinds of things. So anyhow, it's a secret collection, but not to a lot of people. All of this moving that we've been doing for the last few years has taken a lot of people to make it happen. Collections don't move themselves. And as part of this project, we have photographed, cleaned, at least a little bit of light cleaning, and either prepared to move or have actually moved. About 1.7 million objects are included in this move, so that's a lot of things to get moved. We have our regular collections and conservation staff helping with this. We've had a move staff that's fluctuated from about 6 to about 15 people, and we've also been very fortunate in having a lot of volunteers and interns and work study students who've helped. And our volunteers alone in the last 3 years have contributed 261, we've had 261 volunteers who've contributed 28,750 hours, which is the equivalent of 14 full-time people. So we know how to get a lot of bang for our buck. We pay nothing and we get a lot of work out of people. And we've also gone through, obviously this is an expensive move, some of the big ticket items or some of the storage furniture that you'll be seeing, and a lot of supplies. We've gone through several $100,000 in supplies. And some of those that we've really used a lot of are about 500 pounds of hot glue and enough archival foam to wrap around the campanile twice. So that's sort of gives you an idea of the scope of things. It's been a great move. It's an incredible upgrade for these collections. Our plan is to have people be able to come to this facility 20 or 30, 40 years from now, and the objects that they see today will look as well cared for and as good shape as they're going to be like 40 or 50 years from now. So it's been a real pleasure to do this project, and I feel like we've really secured the collections for teaching and research for a very, very long time going into the future. So that's it for the move stuff, and I'm now going to pass this on to my colleague Jane Williams.
Hi, thanks, Victoria. I'm going to be talking today about a particular archaeological collection in the museum and how advances in technology in recent years have given us some new ways to study these artifacts. The group of paintings I'll be talking about were discovered in an excavation undertaken for the University of California in 1899 at the site of Tebtunis, which is, this is a blow-up, it's this area near the Nile River Delta. Most of the paintings retrieved from the site were mummy portraits. These very lifelike portraits are specific to this time and place, Roman period Egypt, particularly the Fayum region. They were painted on wood panels and affixed over the faces of mummies and then incorporated in the wrappings. My first involvement with the mummy portraits at the Hearst Museum was to do their conservation treatment. Most of them were in fragile condition when they were excavated, and over 100 years since then had become so fragile that they really couldn't be handled safely for research and display. These very realistic portraits are visually compelling, but what makes them so interesting to scholars? These are really the first portraits in the ancient world of real people, people that aren't pharaohs and kings. Also, they're a product of the synthesis of cultures in Egypt at this time. They're part of the Egyptian tradition of mummification. You'll see that inscriptions like here, this is blown up here, are in Greek. And the fashions present the latest trends in Rome at the time in hairstyle and jewelry and clothing. That's often how they end up being dated. They're also one of the best representations we have of classical painting. Because of the climate in Egypt, this is where the panel paintings of Greece and Rome survived, not in Greece and Italy. In the 19th century, there was so much interest in these portraits as paintings that many were sold on the art market. As a result, the Hearst Museum collection is one of only 2 outside Cairo that has a group with known provenience that all were excavated from one site. And most significantly, the Hearst Museum collection includes the only known preparatory sketch for a painting that's annotated with notes for the painter. So there's a note here about a purple color to be used for the tunic, a note that she should be portrayed wearing 2 necklaces, that the eyes should be made to look softer, and that gold should be used in the background. But I'd like to talk about how technology is letting us have a fresh look at these paintings. It was the first infrared image, which is what I was pointing to on the right, that allowed epigraphers to translate these. It made these notes legible. Infrared is a really good technique for seeing carbon ink. I'm currently involved in a collaborative project with Northwestern University and the Art Institute of Chicago's Center for the Scientific Study of Art. Luckily, they have an acronym, New Access, to look at the artist's techniques and materials used in these paintings. Traditionally, analyzing artist materials involved removing samples from the artwork and then chemically testing them. And now there have been innovations, particularly in imaging, as you all know from any kind of photography you do. In the last 10 years, the world has completely opened up. Another kind of innovation has been in making portable instrumentation for traditional spectroscopic techniques like FTIR or X-ray fluorescence, so that you can bring the instrument to the artwork, and so you don't need to remove a sample or move the artwork and get the same kind of information about actually the chemical composition. For instance, we used portable X-ray fluorescence, or XRF, to look at this painting. A scholar about 20 years ago had described this as a portrait of a woman of modest means because she appears to have simple clothing and no jewelry. And we found using XRF, well, under the microscope, you can see bits of color where she would have earrings or a necklace and a ring on her finger. And using XRF, we found not only was there jewelry in all of those locations, but the element gold was used. So we know that a precious material was used. We have a complete reassessment of the subject's status, and really what the problems with interpreting it have to do with the condition of the painting, not what the artist intended. One of the imaging advances is one of the techniques we used is photogravimetric stereo. And in this technique, you take a series of photographs with the camera and the artwork in fixed position, and the light in a series of projected from a series of measured locations. The images are combined into one data file that you can manipulate with specialized software to separate, for instance, the color data from the surface and texture data. If you remove the color data, you can really focus on surface texture. You can look at the layering of paint on the surface and the sequence that the artist painted different areas. If you put a calibration target into the image, it's like, I don't know how many of you use color checkers when you take to calibrate color in photographs. This is a calibrated measurement of surface topography. We can actually measure the relief of a paint stroke. So this is a graphical representation of this area from the background. And the smallest valley would represent one brush hair. And we measured that brush hair and found it was 57 microns. And so that begins to give us an idea of the kinds of animal hairs that could have been used to make that brush. That in itself isn't a really pressing question for us, but it gives you an idea of how we can have a measured reference point that we can compare across a series of paintings. This project is part of a larger collaborative effort between some of the museums around the world that have major collections of these portraits. We're bringing art historians and conservators and scientists together to look at these questions and hopefully answer some broader archaeological questions relating to production of artist materials and trade. We're finding already, for instance, that they used a lot of local materials, but they were also using man-made pigments and imported wood, for instance. And of course, the final goal is dissemination. We're hoping by creating this database, students and scholars will be able to come along and come up with a lot better questions than we are and build on the future, which is really tied into the goal of what we're doing at the museum. So thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to talk today about the kind of work that I do as a curator. So my Berkeley job title is research anthropologist, and actually I'm the only one in the entire campus with that title, but in any other museum I would be called a curator. And curation in museums has a kind of a double meaning. You think of curators as subject specialists who do research on the objects and know about the objects in their collection. And then the term curator is also used for exhibitions. The curator is the one that selects objects from collections and from other museums and puts them in a gallery and writes label copy. And so today I'm going to talk to you about a little bit about both of those two things. And I'm going to start with the research part, working down in the collections. I'm going to start with these, and this is sort of the way I found them. We've heard about the Hearst Gym basement today. This is where I discovered them in 2006. They were strapped to a wall, to a column, and that's all we knew about them. When we took them off the wall, we did the first thing you do is you look for a number, an identifying catalog number written on them, and there were no numbers to be seen. So we didn't know what these were. Technically, we didn't even know if we owned them. And it was sort of, I was charged with trying to figure out what these things were. Actually, I'm a North American Indian specialist, so this is a little bit out of my area, but I have an interest in Asia, and they look definitely Chinese to me. So I'll show you the next set of them. There are 5 of them. Actually, you're going to see them later this afternoon. They're about 5 feet tall by about 1 foot wide, and they're marble. And so that's where I was, and trying to, normally in a case like this, I would go to the catalog card and kind of figure it out, look for an obvious identification. But we have 3,000 Chinese objects and almost 3 million objects in the whole collection, so this was not going to be easy. And I kept putting it off. And then at that time, I was curating an exhibit about India. And I was going through a file called Older University Collections, which had been collections that had come to us that had been accumulating for 150 years and had been transferred at various points to the Hearst Museum. And I was looking for Indian things. And by accident, I found a description of 5 marble stela that were given to the university in 1931 and were written up in the minutes of the regents. And one thing led to the other. It gave me the identification of the donors, Albert Bender, and it said Albert Bender had privately published a book about these marbles. So I immediately ran to the library, and I was so excited to read all about them, and it turned out that that's what these things were, that they were donated by Bender in 1931, and he happened to know where they came from and was able to identify them and tell me everything I needed. Well, actually, not everything I needed to know, but it was quite the beginning. So this is Bender, and actually I'm not going to talk much about him. I could go on and on and on. He's a fascinating character who's at the root of almost every major museum and library in the San Francisco Bay Area. But I will say a bit about his Berkeley connections, because you know these are the famous foo dogs, which are outside Durant Hall now. When they were moved there in the 80s when Durant Hall was the Asian Studies Library. Originally, Bender had donated these to the art gallery. The art gallery was the brick building nearby that has the mosaics on it. And Bender was one of the founders of the University Art Gallery in the early 30s. And this is a design that was commissioned by Julia Morgan. It's a little difficult to read, but you'll see here, it's an installation for the marbles here. So this is looking straight on, and then this is sort of from top down. You come in through the court here, and the food dogs are probably around here, and then the 5 marbles are out there. So he had designed this. Of course, that was one of his many friends, was Julia Morgan. And this was meant to be as the basis of the art gallery. And so I kept doing research on them. I'll share some of that research when you come into the section there. But that wasn't the end of it. And I found out that Bender had purchased most of his Asian art collection from a fascinating person named Henry Hart, who taught Asian art at the UC Berkeley Extension. And I found the Hart, I mean, the internet is such a great thing, because I don't know how I would have found Hart's papers otherwise. But I went on the internet and I found that the Hart's papers were just down the road there at Hayward, at Cal State East Bay. So I went to the Hart papers, and I discovered this photograph. And there are 2 photographs in the Hart papers from 1931. One of them is January, and Hart wrote on the back, "Thinking of buying these." And then there's another photo, and he says, February, I've just purchased these. So here is the farthest back I could trace them to the street in Beijing in 1931. And then looking at Bender's book, you can find out what temple these came from, and I'll tell you more about that later. So that's some of the research I've been doing, and it was very challenging, and some of it was pure accident, and some of it was dogged determination. So it was a little bit of both. And I had a lot of fun doing this, and I'm not finished yet. One final comment about these is that after they were displayed in the art gallery in 1935, they were put into storage in Hearst Gym basement, and they've never seen the light of day since. So these are really spectacular, and obviously I'm thinking of exhibiting these in our opening exhibit when we reopen. So that's what I'm going to turn to now. And we can move on to exhibitions. So as you know, the gallery's been closed for several years, and during that time we're still in the middle of physical renovation to the building, from upstairs and downstairs, and conceptual planning for the new gallery. And well, there's a lot that could be said about all of those things. We do want to move the entrance. We want to change the lighting, change the floor, and it's going to look completely different when you come into it. What I want to talk about today is my work as a curator, as someone who's selecting the objects for this space. And that's also going to be radically changed. Because I've been curating exhibits in that space now for over 20 years. And when I started, I would be the sole curator. I'd come up with an exhibit topic like food in California Indian culture or the folk arts of Rajasthan, and we'd fill the gallery with those objects, and there would be a sequence, and you'd go from beginning to end. And that's a fairly traditional way of doing exhibits. When we reopen, actually, we're sort of throwing that out the window, and we're not using that model anymore. For one thing, we won't have a single topic that will cover the entire exhibit, but we'll have themes like gender or consumption or value, and then we'll select different objects, we'll illustrate those themes, and those themes can always be changing. And some objects will stay in for a month, and some will stay in for a year, or vice versa. And we'll be able to swap out different sections over time. Oh, okay. Oh, we're doing. Okay. See, I talked way too much about Bender, and which it should have been the other way around. So my time is open. So is over. I'll just wrapping up. What I will say is that we want this to be a laboratory, as you're sensing, and we always want to be changing and doing new things, and we want to be collaborating with the community out there, with very much the campus. We're going to students and faculty and native peoples, and we're very much looking for reopening. And one thing and the other thing about the new gallery, the new exhibits that we open, is that we're trying to pick things that have, like the Bender marbles, that have never been seen before, or the Fayum portraits, which if they have been seen, have never been seen with this new information and a new research. So there's one thing, I invite you all to come to the opening at the end of the year, and I can guarantee you that no matter what else you think, you will be surprised. So, thank you.
So now I think we have some time if anybody has any questions. Yes?
So you made a really interesting comment earlier about the legality of who you own to like or whatever.
I'm going to repeat the question. I'll repeat the question so everyone can hear us. The question is, what about the ownership of these objects? Has the museum ever run into a case where they're not sure if they're the proper owner? And then what do they do about that?
I can actually take that on.
Well, before you do, let me just say, we've done the research on this, and we found that we do own it.
We own these.
And I won't go into the whole story, but we've given it proper catalog numbers now.
Yeah.
So this is taken care of.
Yeah. But yeah, in a museum, we're a very large, very old museum. We're 115 years old. And so it's not unusual at all to come across things that either you just don't have the provenience for where it came from, or in fact, there's a category in museum work called like founding collections, and it just means kind of like what these were, but it turned out these belong to us. So when you do come across that, you do your work to try to figure out, where did this come from? Did somebody donate it to it legally? Did they have legal title? It's, you get into legal. We talk to campus legal pretty regularly about these kinds of issues, and of course, a lot of our collections were collected pre-UNESCO, pre-1970. So for those things, we have pretty clear title, but it's kind of an ongoing thing. I mean, I figure this move has helped us go through the documentation for a lot of our collections and helped us straighten some of that out, but I think it's going to go on for a very, very, very long time. Yes?
How did the name change from Lowy to Hearst?
That was before my time. It was, my understanding is that the Hearst Foundation or the Hearst family, do you know about this, Dave? Yeah, I think it was.
It was before. I was hired by the Lowy Museum, and when I came, I was working for the Hearst Museum. So I found that, and my first exhibit, I was asked to curate an exhibit about Phoebe Hearst. So Phoebe Hearst, don't get me started, because I could go on and on. Phoebe Hearst was definitely the founder of the museum in 1901. It was her vision and her idea to start this museum and then offer it to UC Berkeley. But it was called the University of California Museum of Anthropology for 60 years until we moved into the building in Kroeber Hall. And the building was named after Kroeber, and the museum was named after Robert Lowy, who had just died. So it was only the Lowy Museum for like 30 years. And then when I came in the early 90s, the name was changed to honor the founder, Phoebe Hearst, in recognition for a major endowment from the Hearst Foundation that actually it supports Jane's work and the conservation on the founding Hearst collections.
Any other questions on this side? Okay, I'll go over there.
Are people still donating objects to you?
Oh, yes. We regularly get offers of donation to the museum, and because maintaining, you'll appreciate this a little more when you go into our storage area, but it's a very expensive endeavor to maintain museum collections, because the way you need to take care of them is, it's just expensive to do. So we try to be very circumspect about what we're able to take in, and make sure it fits in with our mission, that we have the ability to care for it, that it's in good enough shape that it's not going to require a lot of work to do it. But we have a committee that meets monthly to discuss donations that are offered to us.
Do you have a number of items that require any type of special storage, say cold storage or storage in certain chemical environments?
We don't have, well, why don't you take this?
Yeah, we in this facility we have nitrate film. That's where we take advantage of a blast freezer that the Bancroft Library maintains, but that's part of this building. And then we have cool and cold storage for other kinds of photographic media, again for the first time here. And then for other kinds of things, we would love to have, say, a room where we could keep archaeological metals very, very dry, but we don't. So sometimes if something is really unstable, we'll do a microclimate, say where we can put silica gel in with it and keep it very dry. It's becoming more of an issue with modern materials like plastics, or the early versions. The early plastics are some of the worst. So we don't have too much of that, but we collected a fair amount of things in Africa and India in the 60s. That's where you start to get those plastics in them. And then again, it would be a question of different kinds of micro environments for individual objects.
Is there an ongoing effort to acquire new objects?
Well, I can answer that because I'm trying to do that very much for the new exhibit. We, especially the native cultures like California Indians or Guatemalan weavers, have continued to make things, and we have collections that are over 100 years old. And as an anthropologist, it's very important to demonstrate the vitality and continuity of these traditions. So as a curator, I'm working to, obviously on a small scale, because we don't have a lot of room, but we are trying to collect contemporary objects to complete the story of these cultural traditions.
I think it's wonderful about the plans for using the facility at Kroeber Hall, and I wondered, is there specific funding for that? How comfortable are you with the funds that you have? And I want to see a lot of this collection before I die, so I'm hoping you'll continue to do exhibits.
We actually have really been fortunate in the last few years. I'll let our head of development, Dave, take this, answer this question, but to talk about some of the support that we've had from the campus for the last several years related to this.
Yeah, thank you. As gratitude is one of the themes of today, obviously, I think I'd like to share with you that the University of California has just been magnificent in terms of its support, particularly around the collections move that Victoria has been describing, to the tune of $6.5 million. So that's a real, vote of confidence in what we're doing, and we're deeply indebted to the University of California for that. In terms of Kroeber Hall, we're moving along. We've raised $1 million towards that effort, and as folk have been saying, we're aiming for a December 2015 reopening. So we're in pretty good shape. Our current target is actually $200,000 by the end of July, and that will go towards programming for that effort for the opening exhibition. And it's a hard deadline because it's actually, we were fortunate enough to, talented enough to win an award from the National Endowment for the Humanities, which is a matching challenge. So every gift receives a sort of 33% boost. So yeah, we're in great shape, and if you haven't already kind of got the vibe, we're really excited that we can make a huge contribution to the student effort, to the faculty effort, to the community effort, as the questioner was alluding, so that we can. We've really got so much to offer, and we're in great shape. So, thank you.
Well, I think that is a good place to end our formal program and get you on to the real star of the show, which is seeing the objects themselves after this really wonderful description. But let's give our panel a round of applause. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. So thank you.